With CES going on, there is a massive amount of PC gaming hardware news. We got a new AMD GPU with 16 gigabytes of VRAM to talk about. We've got new CPUs to talk about, including AMD's 8000 series CPUs, which will have the 700M APU graphics built in. And this marketing slide is a massive disaster, which we need to talk about. But first, let me help you avoid a disaster. So many people are making a huge PC building mistake, which is thinking so much about the components in the computer, you don't think about what you're sitting in for the hours and hours and hours and hours and hours that you're using the thing. And as someone in my mid-30s, I can tell you I'm getting lower back pain from all of the frankly terrible chairs I've used over the years. And so huge thank you to today's sponsor, FlexiSpot, for sending over their C7 chair, which is incredibly ergonomic and gives amazing lower back support and adjustability, so the chair can fit to your body and provide you the support you need, rather than you just hoping you happen to fit into the chair. This thing's amazing, has a self-adaptive dynamic lumbar support system. The support cushion can detect subtle changes in your posture and automatically adjust itself as you move around to ensure constant support. This thing is extremely adjustable, supports up to 300 pounds, and can adapt to body heights of 5'4" up to 6'2" comfortably. And again, this thing can move with you, support you in various sitting positions. It even has a 20-inch seat, so you'd be comfortable sitting cross-legged on this thing. You can also recline from 90 degrees down to 128 degrees, and they have a 30-day free return policy as well as a 10-year warranty. Talk about having confidence in your product, and I don't think you'll want to take advantage of the return policy anyway, because this thing is truly a great chair. I love having a mesh back so that on those sweaty try-hard gaming sessions, my back is actually not sweaty, stays cool and comfortable. FlexiSpot also has the more affordable ergonomic office chair C6, as well as the essential office chair C3, available for under $200. And please use code C730 to get $30 off when you buy this. Take advantage of the New Year's Day sale. Again, exclusive code C730. This is the best time to buy the C7. Follow the link in the video description and or pinned comment. All right, let's talk about why this slide has me absolutely furious. This slide is going to make some people think that AMD's 700M APUs, like the 780M, is for an integrated graphics processor very good. And you can even play some new AAA graphically demanding games on it, albeit generally closer to, 30 frames per second. But this slide might have people thinking they can play them at a, quick and responsive 60 frames per second. But this slide is a disaster because that is using fluid motion frames. And we need to talk about this because I have to push back against this when I see it in marketing. Nvidia started this trend with DLSS 3 frame generation being used in performance slides with their 4000 series launch, and I've continually pushed back against it. I've actually been more positive about frame generation than I think most media outlets. I often like it, but it's not just raw performance. Going from 30 FPS to 60 FPS using frame generation feels bad. Going from 30 FPS to 60 FPS using actual performance to get real actual game engine frames feels good. Frame generation should be kicked on when you're already at high frame rates, and AMD agrees despite this marketing slide. This is AMD's driver page for the preview drivers that enable AMD fluid motion frames, which, by the way, have been updated to include support for AMD's 700M GPUs. So this is a preview driver, which you could download and try out fluid motion frames if you have one of their 700M APUs. Cool. But right here, AMD even says AFMF is recommended to be enabled while maintaining a minimum in-game FPS of 60. That's the base frame rate before you enable fluid motion frames, before you enable frame generation. This is true for DLSS 3 frame generation as well as FSR 3 frame generation, although those are a bit better than AFMF from a quality standpoint, and so slipping below that base frame rate of 60 can be more tolerable to more people. But AFMF generates frames but with less access to game data because it runs at the driver level. That means that its interpolated frames look worse than the ones you get from a native FSR3 frame generation actually implemented into a game. And it also has the challenge of AFMF will sometimes literally just disable itself for a minute and stop generating frames if there's too large of a gap between frames. This can happen from fast camera motion in a game, as well as from running at a low base frame rate, because the lower your frame rate is, the larger gaps there are between the actual game engine frames, which makes the frame interpolation harder to do. AFMF is already at a disadvantage because it's not directly integrated into the games, and so enabling it from a base frame rate this low to hit 60 FPS is not an experience that AMD even recommends, as I just showed. So using it in a marketing slide to have people who don't either read the fine print or even understand what fluid motion frames are is not a good look, and we need to push back against this type of marketing. You can market having this feature, and AMD actually now having driver level frame generation has a feature that Nvidia does not. And that is a good thing, and they can market that. But they should not market it as if you're getting 60 FPS in Alan Wake 2 on a 700M in any kind of meaningfully good sort of way. Anyway, let's follow up on the CPU news. These APUs are quite good, and they are being integrated into the 8000G series desktop CPUs. There's going to be an 8-core 16-thread, a 6-core 12-thread, another 6-core 12-thread, with a weaker GPU inside of it, and a 4-core 8-thread. Again, and there's 3 levels of the integrated GPUs, the 780M, 760M, 740M, and the 4-core 8-thread version, the 8300G, is going to be system integrators only, not available on the DIY market. So in the DIY market, our price points, I'll become the pointer, are $329, $229, and $176. Those are the suggested prices. We'll have to see how everything plays out in the normal market. Now, I think these could be interesting for people who mostly just want a multi-purpose PC at a low price to use for work and school, and possibly do some light gaming on the side with something like a 780M. That could be interesting for people with the potential to maybe upgrade to a discrete GPU in the future. But if you know you're going to do that right away, it might be better to just buy the faster 7000 non-G chips, because the issue with these is I believe they're cut down in cache compared to the 7000 series. And I think maybe clock speed's a bit too. I would have to check on that. So if you just want a CPU and are going to use a discrete GPU anyway, these aren't really the CPUs you're looking for. I mean, depending on pricing or whatever. But anyway, these will be available January 31st, and I think they do look like interesting chips. I don't report much on mobile stuff, but they're also releasing the updated 8040 series for mobile processors, basically to replace the 7040 series. They're exactly the same thing, other than a more powerful NPU, neural processing unit, to assist in AI-related tasks, which I'm just not an expert on. I measure gaming performance. I don't know what a mobile net v3 is, or what a ESR GAN is, or what a YOLOV is, or what a DPLAV 3 is. I'm more interested in gaming stuff, but when it comes to gaming performance, rather than looking at AMD's slide here, the 8040s will be the same thing as the 7040s, other than that NPU. So just look at the reviews that are already available for the 780M graphics chips in those. So anyway, let's go ahead and move on to AMD's discrete GPU announcement. We have the 7600 XT coming in at $329. Remember, the 7600 is a $269 GPU, and this will be available as rumored on January 24th. And as rumored, it is a 16 gigabyte graphics card. However, my worst fear from a performance perspective has been confirmed, which is, there's different GPU dies that are then either issued in their full potential, or sometimes have some compute units not functioning properly off the silicon, and then you have them cut down a little bit. The point is, the 7600 was already using the full GPU die. So the 7600 XT can't really get any more compute units unless they upgraded to the same die that's used by like the 7700 XT and further cut that down, which seemed unlikely. And that's not what they did. They went ahead and used the same GPU die as the 7600 with the exact same amount of compute units. So again, I'll become the pointer. We have the same 32 compute units and AI accelerators and stream processors. And the only major difference that should affect performance, other than if you were running out of VRAM, is that the game clock and boost clocks are slightly more. This should not have much of an impact on gaming performance, so you would expect basically the same within a couple % performance between these two GPUs. Other than if the 7600 was running out of VRAM, which can dramatically impact performance. I've tested this out a lot in other videos. So for example, you could take a look at my, what is it called? How bad is 8 gigabytes of VRAM in 2023 video, where I measured the 4060 Ti 8 gigabyte versus the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte in a variety of games. And what you can find is that when the game wants to use more than 8 gigabytes of VRAM, but it doesn't have it, you spill over into system memory, and accessing system memory is slower than accessing VRAM, which causes the game's frame rates to slow down. Sometimes it won't properly load in textures, or they load in late, and in the worst cases, you can end up with annoying stuttering. And as you can see here, it can have like a 30% or more performance impact to have to go to the system RAM instead of living in VRAM. And I tested a whole bunch of games, but a very important thing to note is that many games at the types of settings you might be using on these types of GPUs might not use more than 8 gigabytes of VRAM, in which case you would have identical performance other than minor clock speed differences, like I pointed out. And also, more VRAM costs more money, right? And it also costs more energy. You have to power the additional VRAM. So there is some downside to having the more VRAM. So basically, there's pros and cons. If you look at my kind of my wrap up for that video, the point was that when you're using ray tracing, you're almost always going over 8 gigabytes of VRAMs, at least in the recent games that I tested. But if you're at a performance level where you would be unlikely to enable ray tracing, and you were just maybe at ultra settings rather than ray tracing settings, then at 1080p resolution, some games still do spill over 8 gigabytes of VRAM, but many don't. As you move up to 1440p, you could see a little bit more of that, and at 4K even more. And then, but if you play games at high settings, we saw very few games, although some, using more than 8 gigabytes of VRAM at 1080p. I'm bringing all of this up to basically talk about the fact that in many situations, at the settings you would actually be likely to use these GPUs at, they will perform the same, in which case you're spending a lot more money on the 7600 XT to get what should be functionally the same performance plus a little bit for that clock speed boost. However, like I showed you, there are many games spilling over 8 gigabytes of VRAM, which can actually issue a large performance increase in those cases. But again, running that extra VRAM costs energy, so this is a 190 watt part. That's pretty brutal in the face of the competition, like the RTX 4060, because the RTX 4060 is a $300 part that already, if I pull up something like, let's go with tech, I probably just flashbanged you, deal with it. If we pull up like the tech power up relative performance chart, they have the 7600 non-XT, and the 4060 is basically tied in performance. In my measurements, the 4060 more often has a little bit of a lead, but it can depend on the games that you test, what settings, what resolutions, all of that, whether ray tracing's involved, any of that. But the point is that the 7600 XT should also basically fall into this exact performance range when you're not spilling over VRAM, in which case, you're paying more money for the AMD GPU to get the additional VRAM, but again, for around the same actual performance level when you're not hampered by that VRAM. So it kind of puts it in a bit of an awkward spot. And the 4060, do they list the power targets on here? I'm not sure if they list the TDPs on here, but it's a lot lower than 190. I think it's only a little bit over 100. Yeah, the TDP is 115 watts, and it sometimes operates below that. So this does kind of put that card in a bit of an awkward spot where it's going to be drawing almost double the power of a 4060. But it does have double the VRAM, although it's similar performance and this costs more, because adding VRAM onto the card does cost more money to manufacture and all of that. So I don't know, this puts this in a really awkward spot. I'm not sure I like this. The other awkward spot that it's in is AMD's own 7600 XT. 6700 XT. Sorry, I'm not actually dyslexic, but reverse the letters there. 6700 XTs from AMD's previous generation are often available for about the same price we're about to get this new card for, but often these have gone on sale as low as $299. Although they're not usually at that price, they have been on sale for that price before. These only have 12 gigabytes of VRAM, but the thing is, if you're buying these for 1080p gaming in this price point, 12 gigabytes is usually enough, especially if you're not enabling ray tracing, in which case it's possible that the 6700 XT basically costs the same and performs better. It does have less VRAM though, but it kind of puts you in that awkward spot of how excited can you really get over this? Although, like I did say, the 8 gigabytes on the 7600 does cause issues sometimes. So it is nice to get a version with more VRAM. And if you're wondering why wouldn't they just go up to 12, that would involve affecting the memory bus. You'd actually have to cut the memory bus down to get a multiple that would go into 12. Like you'd basically have to cut it down to the equivalent of fitting 8 and then clamshelling it. Sorry, fitting 6 and then clamshelling it. So that would actually just make it worse. The only other way to get to 12 would have been to use the better GPU die, not the same one that's on the 7600. So anyway, it kind of puts them in that awkward spot. They do give some performance graphs here, but again, the fact that they're using max settings in things is often what's spilling over that 8 gigabyte VRAM buffer, or when they compare it against the 2066 gigabyte, which they're doing a lot here, is what's making it spill over that VRAM buffer. Again, when you're comparing against the 7600, you could spill over that 8 gigabyte VRAM buffer, and that's when you see the large gaps in performance. That's the only thing that makes sense there, unless something really weird is happening. Because again, they're exactly the same specs other than the increase to the game clock, and more VRAM does not increase your performance unless you were running out of it at those settings. So it only makes sense to see these large performance jumps between the 7600 and the XT version if it's accounted for by spilling over VRAM, unless there's something really weird and unexplained happening there, right? Anyway, so basically we should expect 7600-like performance plus maybe a couple percent, unless it was a VRAM limited situation where you could see a huge performance uplift, because running out of VRAM, like I showed, can have a huge performance impact. Then we get more of these annoying marketing slides where we're once again seeing AMD fluid motion frames turned on as part of HyperRX. HyperRX can also introduce other image quality issues like turning on Radeon Boost, for example, which dynamically lowers your game resolution under fast mouse movement. And it can also kick on RSR and FSR upscaling on its own. It can do a variety of things. But the point is here, there's 3 colors on each of these bars, so you have to look at them very carefully. The dark color at the bottom is the actual raw performance in these games. Again, still according to AMD's testing, not third-party testing. We'll definitely need that here. The medium shaded version is apparently using quality level upscaling, the 4060 using DLSS, and the 7600 using FSR. And then the lightest color on the edge is using frame generation when it's available. Some games, like these two, have FSR3 frame generation available, and some of them don't, in which case they're kicking on that driver level frame generation. But again, not only is frame generation not really an apples to apples raw performance number, but if you're at a high enough base frame rate before kicking it on, it can be a nice experience in some games. But the fluid motion frames at the driver level, again, they did just issue an update for it, but when I tested out the initial preview driver, I wasn't a huge fan of it. It had worse frame pacing issues and worse image quality than the versions that are natively integrated into games, like FSR3 and DLSS3. So none of the games I tested AFMF at the driver level in felt better to me with it on than with it off. They all either looked worse or felt worse due to the fact that it would sometimes turn itself off, and which felt kind of stuttery, and the fact that the quality of the interpolated frames, like the UI elements can be part of it, so the UIs would often get really garbled. I'm not saying it's impossible that you'd find a game where you might like it, and a lot of the comments in my YouTube videos about it were saying people found it very positive and they liked it. So great for them. I'm just saying, I'm really getting frustrated with these graphs. It's very important to approach frame generation carefully. Anyway, and here's more of the same kind of stuff at 1440p. Interestingly, we do get a slide with a bunch of games saying that they will be featuring FSR3. So they don't give exact release dates on those, but hopefully we'll be getting some more FSR3 frame generation available soon. Again, Cyberpunk's on that list. I know a lot of people are excited for that one. And other than that, there was some useful information in this, including some streaming quality improvements, which, they give screenshots to back up, and it does look better in the screenshot. But basically, they're saying that they're encoding and therefore they're live streaming, which, again, Nvidia has a reputation of having a better quality live stream at the same bit rate, better quality encoder at the same bit rate. AMD has been working on that. It looks like they've made additional improvements to that. Again, this is their own marketing slide, so I don't know. I haven't, we'll want to verify that, right? But the screenshots they're giving in their marketing slide, at least, do indeed look more put together in the updated version. Anyway, another thing they bring up is the fact that the 16 gigabyte card versus the 8 gigabyte card will be more useful in certain productivity workloads and especially certain AI models. Now, like I already mentioned, I am not a big user of AI stuff, so I'm not an expert on this, but I do know that there are certain things, like I know certain types of stable diffusion and things like that, where certain model sizes, if you're inferencing them locally, do require at least 16 gigabytes of VRAM. So this would open up some new productivity applications for this. But anyway, I've just got to say, though, when you're not spilling over the 8 gigabytes of VRAM, if these basically cost the same, and I already don't like the 7600 at $270, I think it needs to be $240-ish, in my opinion, honestly, then spending this much more on it. Again, that more VRAM can be useful, but I think it's going to be a hard sell at that price point. I would have been a lot happier to see this at maybe $299. Anyway, that's my overall thoughts on it. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are in the comment section, and then that now leaves them with this lineup for their 7000 series. I am expecting some price cuts at the top end here, at least on the top two. Now, if NVIDIA's Super Series cards actually sell for the prices, for their MSRPs. If we get a 4080 Super at $1,000, these are gonna have to drop more significantly below $1,000. And if we get a 4070 Ti Super actually available at around $800, the 7900 XTs are going to have to drop further than that. Because if they perform about the same in rasterized, and then NVIDIA has the feature set advantage and the and the upscaling advantage, ray tracing advantage, and all that, then the little bit of extra VRAM against two 16GB cards, where 16GB is probably enough. I'm hoping to see some price movement here. I'm hoping this $329 MSRP also doesn't stick. I'm hoping it drops, and I hope it also pushes down the price of the 7600 8GB. We'll have to see what happens, though. And if you're curious, my full thoughts on the Nvidia lineup, I did a video on that yesterday. If you missed it, you could check that out. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to some quicker stories. Speaking of Nvidia GPUs, it does look like Nvidia marketing is doing a giveaway of an RTX 4080 Super Founders Edition signed by Jensen Huang, the CEO. So if you are interested in that, and we do get a nice look at the 4080 Supers, it does look like the Super series kind of have a black design. Other than that, looks pretty much the same as, and it says Super on it. Again, they look kind of like the Founders Editions have been looking, but this one's signed. Looks like the details are, if you're at CES, you could just go to their booth, but it looks like there's some kind of commenting RTX Super and liking this post and whatnot. Anyway, so all my sources, the website sources will be in the video description. This and this will not be in the video description because these are press decks that I was given a PDF of by AMD marketing. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on here. We're seeing some scams happening. At this point, it looks mostly limited to China, but what is the scam? It's looking like RTX 4090 cards priced reasonably, like you might expect a used card to actually be priced, but, and they have pictures of them running with the RGB lights working and everything like that, and you get it, and the RGB lights do even work, and it looks like a 4090 card. The problem is the actual GPU die isn't in it. So what probably is happening here is we've already had stories of a bunch of 4090 gaming GPUs being dismantled and having the GPU dies inserted into thin blower style cards so that you can run a whole bunch of them as AI workstations. And because of that, you would then have these coolers and PCBs sitting around from the original cooler models. So what are you gonna do with them? Well, if you're pretty unscrupulous, you could pretend they're an actually functioning 4090 and scam some people. That looks like it's happening in China right now from the reports. But again, just something to keep your eye out for in the meantime. Anyway, let's move on to some Intel news. So Intel has launched their 14th Gen Core desktop non-K CPUs and their 14th Gen Core HX and Core 100U mobile series. This is from videocards.com. I must not be on Intel's marketing slide mailing list at this point. I get AMD stuff and Nvidia stuff. Intel never sends me anything. And I don't know who to hey, if anybody from Intel watches my videos, can your marketing team get in touch? Anyway, but we can take a look at this slide here. Where we basically get the whole lineup. Honestly, it's pretty much the 14th gen. Again, we already have the K series. These are the non-K series, which means they're not overclockable, but they're running at lower power targets. Other than that, I think we did get the additional cores on the 14.7, like we did with the K series, but other than that, this doesn't look all that interesting. We do have, if I zoom in a bit here, the price points over here, the RCP in US dollars, on the far right here, so you can kind of take a look at that. I'll have to see how these play out. Again, I haven't been too excited by the 14th gen other than, whatever happens with pricing on the actual market if they start to push anything else down. But that's what we have available here. What are the F versions? The F versions don't have a built-in integrated GPU, and you can see their pricing here. So these have now been launched. The Core HX stuff is the mobile things, which again, I don't report on too much on my channel, but here's the slide. There you go. And then we do have the Core U series processors. So anyway, there you go. And again, sources will be in the video description if you want to take a closer look at any of those. When will we be getting an actual desktop gaming CPU update that isn't like the 14th gen, where it's literally the same thing as the 13th gen with the tiniest of tweaks to try to pretend it's different? Well, Intel's Arrow Lake gaming CPUs are apparently coming this fall. And next-gen Lunar Lake is reported to bring significant IPC updates and over 3 times neural processing unit uplifts. So Arrow Lake gaming CPUs this fall, and apparently that should be an actual architecture update. Will it have meaningful performance improvements? We'll have to wait and see. Apparently it will have an AI accelerator, which, again, I'm more interested in gaming, and for now that hasn't been particularly interesting in gaming workloads. So we are seeing 2024 to 2025 in this range. Before we hit 2025, some new Arrow Lake, Lunar Lake, and Panther Lake looks like on that list there with those announcements. So we'll have to see what happens there. Now, we are getting an MSI Claw handheld coming with an Intel Core Ultra processor. We have pricing now at $699. I've already talked a little bit about this before we had pricing. The main thing that's interesting about this compared to all of the other, Steam Deck style gaming PC handhelds competitors out there, we have so many now, the Legion Go, the ROG Ally, the Steam Deck itself, a bunch of stuff from ANEO, GPD Win, a whole bunch of them out there. The different thing here is that this is Intel-based instead of AMD-based. The vast majority of the, pretty much all the other ones we've been seeing out there lately are using AMD's mobile APUs. So I'll be interested to see what the performance differences are, overall, as well as game by game on an Intel Core Ultra processor with Intel Arc integrated graphics. It'll just be interesting to see how that plays out and what sort of feature differences we would get. This does have a 7-inch 1080p display. That's 120 hertz. It is touchscreen, and it does get to 500 nits. Also, I believe somewhere in here it says it is variable refresh rate. I was wanting to check on that because really with the Steam Deck OLED, which is what I'm currently using as a handheld gaming PC, the only thing that I really wish it had that it doesn't is variable refresh rate. Yeah, you can usually find a good frame rate cap to use, but it would be nice to have that variable refresh rate. So anyway, interesting to see how that one will play out. We're getting a bunch of monitors announced. Man, I got to move quick. We're almost on 30 minutes here. So Asus is unveiling a bunch of monitors, including some QD OLEDs. We're seeing a lot of 32-inch monitors, including some dual modes, where we are seeing some of them that are the 4K 240, but also go into 1080p 480 hertz mode. Also, on these QD OLEDs, they are announcing some improvements like optimized text clarity. I'd like to see how that plays out. However, when we look at the release dates on these things, I believe the QD OLEDs that are coming out soon, but then in Q1, but those don't do the 240 to 480 dual mode. It looks like the W OLEDs will be coming in the second half of 2024, and these ones are the ones that have the dual mode 240, 480. With the 1300 nits and the improvements. So basically, these aren't the same thing. Some are QD OLED, some aren't. They're not going to be coming out at the same time, and they don't all have that same feature set. So do be careful about which ones you're getting. Acer is also announcing some mini LED monitors, including one that's like 2 4K monitors stuck together, basically, at 120 hertz. That one's $2,500, but some people might be interested in that, especially for productivity situations, in my opinion, where having that much screen real estate could certainly be interesting. We're getting Alienware also talking about QD OLED gaming monitors, including 32-inch 4K monitors at 240 hertz and 27-inch 1440p monitors at 360 hertz. That one's at 900. The 4Ks were at 1200. But again, the QD OLED panels don't look like they're going into that that dual mode. So I think we're just getting the 240 hertz 4K without the without being able to go into the esports mode, 1080p 480, whatever. Anyway, we're seeing some cooler models for the 7600 XT 16GB from Gigabyte here. We are seeing Acer launching new 7700 XTs and 7600 XT Nitro versions and an RX 7800 XT Predator series. Getting some new cooler models on those, although it's looking like my my form may need to resubmit apparently to load the actual images on that so we can actually see them, which would be nice anyway when I'm trying to show them off. We are seeing MSI launching 40 Super Series GPUs and a new Expert Series. Kind of interesting design on the Expert Series. It seems to have the sort of almost more like Nvidia's Founders Edition design, although I still think I like the overall look of the Founders Edition a little bit better. But that's certainly an interesting graphics card design. Lenovo is also launching its own Legion series of 40 Supers and 4090Ds, although those would be bundled into their Legion gaming PCs as bundles rather than, I think, sold on the DIY market. And is there anything else I need to cover here for today's video? We're seeing Steam setting a new concurrent user peak at 34 million, so PC gaming continues to grow. And it is, along those lines, getting more PlayStation ports, where we are seeing Horizon Forbidden West with an early PC comparison PC video showcased by Nvidia, announcing DLSS 3 in the game and all that. And somebody has already put together a comparison of what we got from the PC footage versus the PS5. Looks pretty similar, so I think the main differences would probably come in terms of actual just performance and resolution. And I think that will be it for today's video. Hopefully you guys found it useful and or interesting. Huge thank you to subscribers and especially channel members. Clicking the join button to directly support the channel financially is so helpful, and I'm so honestly just amazed that some people are willing to do that. That is absolutely huge, and I hope everybody has an excellent day.